Thank you, Dom. I can't upload my slides. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, no worries. We'll just make sure that you're a co-host and then you'll be able to share your slides, Ian.
Great, okay. So when I spoke to you, it was a week last Sunday, wasn't it? Your first weekend of this. I sort of ran through in a high level what Retrofit was all about to get you thinking about what the priorities are with retrofitting buildings to become zero carbon. And thankfully, what Dan and Kate have just said is broadly consistent with what I said. But of course, they went into a lot more detail, which I hope was helpful to you. Obviously, in putting together the interim carbon plan, we went through a lot of detail, and just getting my share screen up now. There. So we should be nearly there with slides. That's it. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you.
You're in
yes,
we can see a lot of different, so you might need to just adjust that so it zooms in on the main
yeah
slide that you're showing us.
I think I need to swap screens. No, I don't know why it's doing that. Swap displays.
There we go.
That's it.
It's an important part of the conversation guidelines that we're all patient with each other when the inevitable tech troubles happen. So,
well, thanks for your patience in this case. Yeah, so when we were putting this plan together, I suppose you could describe us as experts putting this together. We went thinking through a lot of the detail, and we had a lot of discussion, similar sort of discussion that you're going to have, and we came up with these actions. And there's one specific one of the actions that we thought we weren't fully qualified to make a judgment on, and that's where the Citizens Assembly, your input is required to think, well, what would the Devon people think? This is not a cut and dried black and white issue. So that's what I'm going to point to you towards. So my slides are actually repeating what I sent last time, but I just thought a quick run through. If you can't remember from last time, or just from what Dan and Kate have said this evening, 40% of Devon's emissions are from buildings, half of them from homes, half of them from other public and commercial buildings. So it's a big issue. It's mainly from heating. I don't know what's happened to that slide. It hasn't quite come through tonight. Maybe that picture is off watching the football somewhere. But what that slide says is that the majority of the carbon and energy that we use for building, it comes from heating and hot water. That's the big issue. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to insulate buildings so that we use less energy, use less for heating. We need to get off gas. I think Dan touched on this. We need to get off that gas quickly, and oil and LPG and all those other fossil fuels we use for heating. We need to start using electricity for heating and hot water, which really means heat pumps to be most efficient. And we need to make sure that homes are healthy by making sure they're ventilated properly at the same time as well. Because as you insulate, you need to ventilate as well to keep them nice and healthy. Hydrogen probably isn't going to get to our homes in Devon. So electricity is more expensive. So that's a challenge in the first place if we're swapping out gas for electric. But if you use a heat pump, they can use a third. You can get 3 times the heat out per unit that you put in. But you do need to get the insulation right. And the electricity grid needs to become zero, which means also generating more electricity from renewable resources and making sure that it's available at the right time. This is kind of the grid friendly. If we all put our heat pumps on in uninsulated houses on the coldest night of the year, the grid can't cope with that. So it has to be grid friendly electrification, which means good insulation. A lot of homes owned by all sorts of different people, owner occupiers, private landlords, social landlords, And then you've got all those business and public buildings as well. And delivery is slow. Delivery is probably slower at the moment than it is for the number of electric vehicles being coming onto our roads to replace diesel, or probably quite a lot slower than renewable electricity, like wind turbines coming onto the grid to replace gas electricity generation. So it's probably the slowest rate of delivery at the moment out of all those different sectors that we need to decarbonise. So key question is, how on earth do we speed up delivery given all that complexity? The way we've been doing retrofit to date hasn't always been great. We kind of need a better way of doing it that delivers more carbon emissions, that pays for the work in a better way, and recognises that we've done a lot of the easy stuff. You know, we're into more difficult stuff, and we need to get the quality and performance right. And we need to do this in a way that it's really attractive to people. It's not being forced on them. It's not something they don't want to do. But people, it has got to be done in a way where it's really attractive to most people to do, and everybody wants to do it. And that's not the case at the moment. And just not to forget that retrofit can deliver not just carbon benefits, but it can make homes healthier, warmer, more affordable. It creates local jobs and businesses to do the work, and it delivers regeneration of neighbourhoods as well. It can make areas look better, feel better. So the Devon Carbon Plan at a headline, these are the actions. First of all, an independent trusted advice service and trusted local companies that can do the work. Well, the good news is that there's work in progress. People at the county council and the district councils and the unitary councils in Plymouth and Torbay are working together at the moment to try and put that service in place. The ironic thing is that up until about 10 years ago, there was a national independent trusted advice service. You could phone up, you get a local person, and they give you good advice and they point you in the right direction. That stopped in 2010 with the government cuts around austerity, and we haven't really had that since, but we need it to get this job done. But something's already happening there, so we're not particularly asking you about that element of the work. We need a new way of doing zero carbon, something that goes deep whole house retrofit in as many homes as possible, probably not all of them, but as many as possible. Well, as I said last time, we are already trying to do that using this Dutch government approach, the Energiesprong approach, that helps to pay for the savings, helps to pay for the work through the savings that the retrofit delivers over the long term. Well, we've already started in Devon. We're out ahead of the rest of the country. We've already started to do that in Devon, start to work out how to do that. So we're not particularly asking you about how we do that so much. But what we are asking you is, how on earth do we encourage or require even people, building owners, to do retrofit to their buildings? That's what we're really focusing on you, because it's not self-evident. We don't think it's a done deal about how you get everybody to do this. This is what we want the Citizens' Assembly to have a really good think about and come back to us with what you think is acceptable, what's needed. This is the summary out of the Devon Carbon Plan, a little bit more detail than the bullets that I just showed you, and essentially says the same thing, but it's a bit more detail. So I've just put that slide up for reference, really, so that you can go and have a look at that if you want to go back and see what the Devon Carbon Plan says overall. But let's just drill down. This is my last slide. Let's just drill down a little bit about what this, what are the incentives or legislation even to accelerate building retrofit? What could we do here to get people to do this? So how could we incentivize or reduce the barriers to retrofit? And we'd like your views on that. How could we increase maybe the legal obligation or the financial imperative to speed up retrofit? You know, it's a climate emergency after all. This is going to be a lot easier. Retrofit is going to be a lot easier for everybody if everybody does it. You know, there's economies of scale to be had. You know, if everybody does it, there's a bigger industry working harder, training people, really good components, getting the job done right. It's easier if it's a bigger volume. But how do you force everybody to do that? And is that the right thing to do? You know, some things that could be done, for example, the examples here, and these aren't the only ones. We want you to be thinking and think creatively about potential solutions. But maybe, for example, if you were doing an extension to your house or altering it, maybe the planning permission from your local council could require you to do whole house energy efficiency as well. If you want your planning permission to do your extension, you've got to make your whole house energy efficient, perhaps. Another example is when you're selling your house, you've got to hit a minimum energy performance certificate level, you know, a minimum level of energy efficiency in your building before you're allowed to sell it, maybe. Another example, well, perhaps actually the Devon Climate Emergency organisations, they own houses and public buildings. I think 3 of them are social landlords and they own about 15,000 homes. Perhaps they should lead the way. Perhaps if they go first, other people will be more willing to follow. Some things to consider, just finally. You know, this is a complicated topic. There's lots of potential consequences, and some of those things that I mentioned, examples, we probably can't do just locally on our own without some changes to national legislation. So there's something here that maybe we ought to be asking permission for to do of national government, or maybe we should focus on just what we can do locally and do it. Other considerations: what are the public going to feel about whatever we recommend, whatever you decide is acceptable? Draw that into your thinking. You know, we don't want to be doing something that there's going to be a massive public backlash against. We want to motivate people to do things, not to campaign against things. So put that into your thinking. Think about the people who can't afford to pay this on their homes. You know, think about equality issues and the ability to pay. You know, everybody earns something different from everybody else. Everybody's got different household incomes, and obviously some people are poorer than others. So let's think about equality as well in this. And then finally, are there any unintended consequences? The things that might happen if you do some of the actions that you might come up with, that might not be self-evident, that might push things in a bad direction in another way, perhaps. So that's just setting out the stall for the deliberations that we're asking you to go into. Really think in some detail and think about this specific question, not about whether PV is good or wall insulation is good or whatever. We're accepting that as a given. What we're asking you is what is going to be acceptable to the people of Devon, to encourage them, to help them to do retrofit to their buildings, and is it reasonable to require them, even legislate, that people do something at least around retrofit? Is that a good thing to do? What would that look like? That's what we're asking you to think about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. So